So, what is EMDR? So, EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It is a type of intervention that a therapist will help a client go through if they're struggling with the memories of a traumatic event or the memories of a difficult period of time. So, a traumatic event would be something like we see on the nightly news that somebody has gone through. So, it's not just about veterans who've gone away into a war torn environment, can also be domestic violence, something like sexual assault or childhood abuse. Those sorts of things are traumatic events. But it also can help with things that people have gone through that aren't quite as violent, also really difficult to process, like family dysfunction at home, or a toxic relationship, or bullying, or even sexual harassment at work. There are a lot of different events that EMDR can work for really well. So, one of the things that's very important is that EMDR helps the client move past the memories of the event. So, I like to think of trauma or a traumatic event or multiple events like a virus that we have on our computer, on our desktop. So, if our computer has been exposed to a virus, it'll often run a whole bunch of stuff in the background. It'll slow our computer down. It might be sort of glitchy and stuff like that. And that can often happen a little bit to our brains when we've gone through a traumatic or difficult experience. So, what that might look like is we get emotionally triggered very easily. And those triggers can be things like sight, an image, or a location. It can be a smell like gunpowder or any type of cologne. It can be something like sound, like a song on the radio or firecrackers or anything like that. It can be being close to somebody, the movement that a person has near us where they touch us or something like that. All of those things are kind of leftover residual things from a traumatic experience. And as this traumatic experience is running in the background of our brains, it can often re trigger us, which sends us back into that memory or difficult memories that you've been through. And it can be emotionally very overwhelming. So, so, what happens when you go into an EMDR session? So, EMDR, oftentimes the therapist will have a client recall the memory in a way while watching a light bar go back and forth. So, this is not like hypnotizing the client, but it's like watching the dots or lights go back and forth on a bar, and that activates that rapid eye movement that we often go into in our deepest forms of sleep that help us reprocess our day. So it's a way to recall the memory and then slowly but surely over an extended period of time, the client will begin to start to lose some of the details of the memory. Often I have clients who say that they feel like the memory becomes fuzzy or it's harder to recall. So you'll think about the memory and then all of a sudden your brain will kind of have it fade away, or your brain will go to a different thought and kind of not be interested in staying with that traumatic memory anymore. So oftentimes clinicians will also use things like pulsars that you hold in your hands that vibrate back and forth, stimulating that same sort of idea of the rapid eye movement. And often people will even use headphones where there's a sound that's bilateral sounds back and forth. All of these things are creating that calm space within your body that was very, very overwhelmed during the traumatic experience. So we calm the brain down and the body down as we begin to reprocess those memories. And it makes a huge difference so that the emotional weight and the chances of you being re-triggered when you think about the memories begin to diminish over the time. So let's talk about some misconceptions of EMDR. This is not hypnosis at all. So the client is fully aware of what's going on in every EMDR session. And so that's very important to know. You don't have to share any more about the traumatic experience than what you want to share. And so it's great because if you feel like you want to hold things back for privacy's sake, I, as a therapist, don't need to know all the details if you're not ready to share those for sure. It's important to note that it is challenging. In the first session, most people feel very emotional, and that's really, really normal. But as you process the same traumatic memory each time until it reduces to a manageable level, you can really feel like you're moving so it doesn't feel as difficult each session. On average, it takes about 8 to 12 sessions to get through a traumatic event. So that's an important thing to know that it's not just one session, it takes several sessions and everybody's differently. I've seen clients who've processed very traumatic events in their lives within 2 or 3 sessions. And then I've seen other clients who processed very traumatic things, but it took an extended period of time of 12 sessions or more. It's really hard to determine how long it's going to take, but you can know that each time that you do it, it's going to feel less and less emotional. You're going to hold those memories less and less in terms of details, and it doesn't feel so overwhelming. So, what does a typical EMDR session look like? Well, I think it's really important to keep in mind in terms of EMDR, we don't start right away processing a traumatic event. That was always my concern when I first started doing EMDR with my own therapist. And that's not the way it is. So, that's good. The second thing I would say is that first, we're going to establish a really great relationship together and get to know each other with several sessions before we would ever get to the point of that. EMDR has a great sort of protocol, so it's very formulaic in the way that you go through all the steps. And the first and most important step is just kind of doing history taking, getting to know each other, having more of a list of the things that you'd like to process. That list can always change. And then several sessions in, we'll start working with what we call resourcing, which are things that you will use in each session to feel calm and comfortable in your body. And definitely use those at the end of every session. Another common concern with clients is, am I going to be a complete mess after an EMDR session? And what I say is, yes, chances are you will be emotional. But the good thing about it is we will make sure that you feel very calm and regulated and grounded in your body before I let the client leave for the session. I don't want to go, hey, peace out. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. And you still feel really dysregulated, overwhelmed. That's not nice. And that's not a really good way to handle therapy. So we definitely set all of those things up ahead of time so that when you're ready to do your first trauma target and begin the processing, you feel like you have all of the control. And that's another important thing to remember. As a client, you can say, stop, I need a break. Can we take a pause here? Let's talk about some things. So, lots of times in a typical EMDR session, what we do is I'll have the client recall the memory in their mind like trying to play it like a movie. Often trauma memories are glimpses of different fragments of movies. It's not often like a full video that you would press play on. But trying to recall the memory, will find out where the body sensation is, where they feel the memory in their body, the emotions that might come up. And then on a scale of 10 to 0, 10 being the worst and 0 being neutral, where are you today on that scale? And then we'll either do light bars, so you will follow your eyes back and forth on a light bar, or hold pulsars, or audio for an extended period of time, usually a few seconds to up to a minute or even longer. Then you stop, and then we can chat in between sets, which is really good because sometimes things pop up or you want to discuss them. We'll chat really shortly so that we can get you back into the memory again. Lots of times we'll go so many sets. So it could be as many as 7 or 8 or up to 15 or 20, just depending on the allocated time. But each time that you process, although it starts out difficult, it begins to slowly diminish ever so slowly as you go throughout the session. So at the end of session, we will talk about putting this memory into a container visualization that we create way before we do this first session of EMDR. And then I have lots of different resourcing visualizations that we can use to make sure that you feel calm and grounded before we end the session. Then the next session, we pick up and do the same exact thing, ideally working down the scale as fast or slowly as your brain allows until you get down as close to a 0 as possible. And that's kind of the way that a typical session goes with EMDR. So, what does EMDR help with? EMDR can help with traumatic events like you see on the nightly news, natural disasters, deployment for veterans, car accidents, sexual assaults, childhood abuse, domestic violence. Those things EMDR works really well for. And we often refer to those things as big T traumas, but it also can work really well for things that we call little t traumas, that can be things like toxic relationships or partnerships, things like bullying at school, harassment at work, neglect, or childhood emotional abuse, betrayal trauma, or relationship trauma, especially in families. Those things work really well when it comes to EMDR. So it's a very versatile thing to use EMDR to help clients get through traumatic events or difficult events in their past. If you found this video helpful, subscribe to my channel. I offer short weekly videos that are supportive in helping you manage anxiety, trauma healing, grief, betrayal, and divorce recovery. And if you're considering working with an EMDR therapist, check out in the comments for the link to my calendar to set up a consultation where we can talk about what's bringing you into therapy and how I might be able to help. And until then, take care.